Lena once believed that silence was a kind of peace. She saw it in quiet mornings when sunlight touched the edges of their curtains, in the way Mark passed her a coffee cup without needing to speak, in how they moved around each other like dancers who knew the rhythm by heart. Back then, silence was soft. It meant understanding, comfort, home. But over the years, silence began to change. It stretched between them in longer pauses until it became something hollow. A different kind of quiet, the kind that no longer listened. She began to feel that they weren't sharing silence anymore. They were simply avoiding noise. Not fighting. Not talking. Just drifting. It started slowly. He stopped asking about her day. Stopped noticing small things. When she wore a new dress. When she put cinnamon in his coffee the way he liked. He smiled less. He was home less. And when he was home, his attention seemed elsewhere inside his phone, or on distant thoughts he never voiced. At first, Lena made excuses for him. Stress at work, tiredness, a passing phase. She told herself it would return to normal, that these small gaps were just temporary. But the space between them kept growing. Like water seeping into walls, invisible at first, until the foundation began to shift. She began noticing details. A password on his phone that hadn't been there before. Laughter in the next room that stopped when she entered. The scent of unfamiliar perfume, not strong, but foreign enough to stand out in the laundry. She found long black hairs in their car, though her own hair was chestnut and short. The signs were small but persistent, like drops of water from a leaking faucet. Lena never confronted him. There was no dramatic moment. No shouting or accusations. Something in her didn't want confirmation. She already knew. And knowing quietly was less painful than hearing it aloud. She didn't need his confession. What she needed was time to understand what would come next. She went on with her days. Cooked dinner. Cleaned. Watered the plants. She smiled in front of friends and said things were fine. She even laughed at his jokes when they were out, though her laughter felt far away from herself. It was like watching someone else wear her skin. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the emptiness that came before it. The realization that Mark had left her emotionally long before he left her physically. He had been fading for a long time, piece by piece, until the man she once loved became a stranger sitting across from her at breakfast. One day, Lena found a calendar notification on their shared laptop, an upcoming dinner reservation for two, made under her name, at a restaurant she'd never been to. The reservation was for a night she was supposedly out of town visiting her sister. She stared at the screen for a long time. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. She simply closed the laptop, stood up, and cleaned the already spotless kitchen counter. Her fingers needed something to do. That night, as Mark slept, she stood in the darkened hallway, looking at the pieces of their shared life, framed photos from Paris, souvenirs from Lisbon, the bowl they bought at a street market. All of it felt like props in a play that had already ended. She no longer recognized the home she lived in, nor the woman she had become inside it. She didn't leave right away. She took her time. Days passed. Then weeks. She began to quietly pull back, deleting old playlists, storing photos in boxes, removing his shirts from her side of the closet. Not in anger, but in preparation. She was making space for herself in a life that had no room left for her. Eventually, Lena booked a small cottage by the sea. It was a quiet place, away from their city, from shared memories, from everything that reminded her of who she used to be. She didn't tell Mark. She left a note. It wasn't long, just enough to say what needed saying, that she was done being invisible, that she had chosen herself. The cottage was silent, but this silence was different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't sad. It was clean and open, like fresh air after a storm. She repainted the walls white, hung her own paintings, and filled the shelves with books she loved. She didn't ask anyone's opinion. She bought bread in the mornings, took long walks by the water, and kept a journal not to record events, but to remember how she felt. That was the part she had lost most deeply, her feelings, her voice. At first, it was hard. Naming emotions felt like trying to speak a language she hadn't used in years. Some days she wrote just a single word, empty. Other days, free. Over time, she filled pages. Pages of grief, relief, regret, and discovery. She began to dream again, vivid, strange dreams. Sometimes about drowning, sometimes about flying. In one, she sat across from herself in a calf, and neither of them spoke. They just looked. And in that silence, something passed between them, recognition, maybe. Forgiveness. She learned to sit alone without feeling lonely. She began humming again while brushing her hair. She lit candles for no reason, not for romance, not for memory, just to enjoy the light. She wore colors again, ate what she wanted, slept with the window open. One day, she passed a mirror and caught her own eye. She stopped. Her reflection looked back, not the old Lena, not the hurt Lena. Someone new, someone growing. She smiled. Later that week, she bought herself a ring. Nothing fancy. A silver band with a pale blue stone. She wore it on her middle finger, not as a replacement for a wedding ring, but as a promise to herself. A symbol of presence, of wholeness. She had left nothing behind but illusions. What remained was real. People in the nearby town sometimes asked about Mark. She told them they had taken different paths, that it was better this way. And it was. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the hurt had shape now. It no longer ruled her. It simply lived beside her, like an old scar. Months passed, then a year. The seasons changed, and so did she. There was a bench near the cliffs where she liked to sit with a cup of tea. The wind there was sharp. The sea was endless, folding in and out, telling stories no one could hear. Watching it made her feel grounded, reminded her that nothing stays still forever. That pain passes, that people leave, and you still breathe. One morning, while sitting there, she saw a small bird building a nest between two rocks. It moved with determination, carrying tiny pieces of grass and thread, placing each one with care. She watched it for a long time. Then she stood up and walked back to the cottage. There was fresh bread to bake, a painting to finish, a journal to write in, a life not rebuilt, but reborn.